who is William Shakespeare? Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. I am Chris Gore, and I know you know who William Shakespeare is, the famous playwright. But did you know that there is I hesitate to call it a conspiracy theory. There's actually a documentary that presents a very compelling case that Shakespeare was a pen name for someone else who wrote all of those works. I have the co-directors on, also twin sisters, Laura Wilson and Lisa Wilson. Oh, wait, sorry, Annie. Laura Wilson and Lisa Wilson are here. Thank you for appearing on the Film Threat Podcast. That was your publicist, Annie Jeeves, who's a good friend of mine, who briefly popped on. But let me ask you, I knew nothing about this when I sat down to watch your documentary. You have the amazing Derek Jacobi on there, who could read. I mean, he's appeared in so many films involving Romans, which it doesn't make a lot of sense that Romans would have British accents, but it works. It works for the movies. And Derek Jacobi, if you just, look him up, he's in so many things, and most famous probably for I, Claudius, which I'm sure you're aware of. But this is not. That's why I think calling it a conspiracy theory is not accurate. There is a very reasonable argument that has been presented that William Shakespeare was a pen name used by someone else. Tell me about this theory, where it came from, and why it's maybe not more widely talked about. Your documentary is the first time I've ever heard of it. So, oops.
Well, we lost Laura, but I'll kick in there. Hopefully we'll bring her back in. But yeah, there's a long, all the way back to Shakespeare's time, there's been questions about the identity of William Shakespeare. The playwrights of the time, there seems to be some controversy over who he is, some kind of censorship, dare I say, of who he was. But he seems to have taken part in it to some extent. So it does go all the way back to the 1590s when the name first appears, and it was hyphenated to denote a pen name. And then it's picked up again, in the Victorian times. Francis Bacon was the first, I think, candidate brought forward. So there's this long chain of disbelief. And, if you see the film, you'll see that some of the most notables of all time, Henry James, Mark Twain, Sigmund Freud, they all doubted it as well. So it's not so much, like you said, a conspiracy theory, but rather a long chain of disbelief.
And I think maybe I get the joke of the title, Last Will and Testament. Now I feel like I get it now that you spelled that out. Last Will, period, and Testament, the title of your documentary. It's pretty interesting because I think one of the most compelling arguments is that these plays were wildly popular at the time. And they, in a way, the author of the plays, I'm not even going to say Shakespeare, the author of the plays was trying to comment on the present era without getting in trouble, and weaving it into this fiction, and with some messages specifically targeted towards the Queen. And so I almost think it's the sort of, a version of, say, like Gene Roddenberry in the original Star Trek series, talking about a lot of the struggles of modern civilization, but wrapping it up in some fantastical science fiction adventure on television. And the author of the Shakespeare plays was in a way doing the same thing. And the arguments are really, really compelling. Laura, what are your thoughts on putting this whole thing together and presenting this well-reasoned argument? Oh, you're muted here. Let's get.
Yeah, there we go. Sorry about that. Yeah, no. The last will, full stop, is a clue for us, is that we really feel the traditional biography is just about over. It's reached the end of what we, and that the authorship question now is replacing that. I think it's a great whodunit. It's not a question of who done it. It's a question of who didn't do it. And more it's looking like the man from Stratford didn't. What makes it tricky is that a lot of people don't realize that the story that you're told in your schools is not based on a lot of documentary evidence. There isn't a literary paper trail to prove that the man from Stratford was the author. And so that when people start to realize that we don't have any letters, we don't have any signatures, well, we have 6 shaky signatures. They're all spelled differently. They're in different hands. That's it. So the greatest writer of all time, we've got 6 shaky signatures. We didn't letters, no original manuscript. So that makes it complicated. Had his name not appeared on the first folio, I don't think we'd be talking about it today, because if they'd been published anonymously, everyone would have been going after looking for the right author, and they would have solved it. We think it's pretty much solved at this point, but because the name Shakespeare appears on that, it's a front. And once you realize that the plays are tricky, brief chronicles of the period, a political commentary on the times, and that it was a totalitarian state, highly censored, you can start to realize why these plays needed the subterfuge, and that includes, obliterating the author.
I think you make a very compelling argument, because I think so much of, I don't think people realize, like, in historical context, how radical those plays were. I don't think that who would even be able to get away with it. I mean, this was a time where you could be executed for artistic offenses. These days you get canceled, which is, I guess, a form of digital execution, so to speak. But I cannot think that, like, who could have gotten away with it. I'm curious about your thoughts.
Only someone at the court of Queen Elizabeth could have had
Right.
any kind of political protection to engage in it. We know she fully supported the theater. And what's not well known is that everybody thinks, when they think of Shakespeare, they think of the public playhouses. But in reality, those plays were written for the Queen, for the court. They migrated to the public theaters. So they engaged in the jokes and in the political and social satire themselves, but in the privacy of the court and in the palaces for their entertainment. Then it starts to migrate, and these jokes, these inside jokes, start to go into the public view. Then it becomes uncomfortable. And in the 1590s, with the popularity of the playhouses and the plays themselves, then the state we believe, had to intervene. Whether or not the pen name was imposed on the author, or whether he agreed, it still remains to be seen. It looks like the Stratford man is in play, maybe as a play broker. But again, it's to deal with real life stories being put forward on the stage, which of course it was treason to even depict the Queen, the monarch, or even her key counselors like Lord Burleigh. It just simply was not allowed, as we state in the film. Well, then why is it occurring? And then how did the state deal with that if it did slip into the public realm?
And is this something that is widely spoken about amongst the community of actors and people who perform Shakespeare's works? Is this something that is a point of discussion, debate, whatnot?
Absolutely. I think the authorship question is really popular for young actors, because it's a portal into the plays. It helps with their intent. When they know the authorship problem, when they know the different candidates, I think that the plays begin to take on a deeper meaning for them. I mean, we were incredibly fortunate. We've got 3 of the top Shakespearean actors in the world, preeminent Shakespearean actors in the world, appearing in the film, and they're all doubters. Okay, so if there are frightened little actors out there that are worried to come forward that I'm actually entertaining the authorship question, they sure made it a heck of a lot easier, because they are outspoken doubters. And it doesn't kill the plays to go looking for an alternative author. It only brings them forward in a deeper way.
I think it makes it far more interesting, because that kind of anonymity allows a certain freedom to be able to express certain ideas. I think that this is why the internet can be so contentious and whatnot, because people hiding behind a keyboard, and you would think that at the time someone would definitely have to hide to be able to express some of these ideas. I'm just like, it's amazing. It's really interesting the way that parts of the documentary play like a thriller, right? Like there are moments where I kind of feel like I'm getting wrapped up in this. I almost wish it was a series, to continue this investigation, because while you are leading towards some conclusion, I feel like it's still open-ended.
We did intentionally leave it open-ended. And the author, ironically, wanted us, posterity, to engage in the authorship question, Hamlet's final words, "Draw thy breath in pain to tell my story." And you go to the sonnets, "I once gone to all the world must die." He's telling posterity, look, I think there's a good chance I'm going to be consigned to historical oblivion. Take part in this and bring it forward. And that's the beauty of it, is we left it open-ended. There are leading candidates. The Earl of Oxford, which we really focus on in Act 2 of the film. We try to bring more of his story forward so that you can engage in that whodunit. And then you can go back and you can research Mary Sidney or Francis Bacon or the Earl of Derby from that same perspective. We chose the Earl of Oxford because we do think it's the most compelling case. But in the end, I think it's probably going to lead, it's going to lead to a group theory. I think there's one sole journey through the canon, and I think it's the Earl of Oxford, and certainly the Queen Elizabeth. And it is a commentary on her reign and what they were dealing with at the time. So that's the true legacy he leaves behind, is that historical record. But yet it's entertainment too. So there's multiple ports of entry. We left it open-ended so that you could pick for yourself what interests you and take the ball and run with it.
Well, what do you both think?
Go ahead, Laura.
Yeah, well, just to circle back to your whodunit, the film opens with Sir Derek Jacobi saying it's the greatest whodunit in the world. And what's great is that if you look at it like Shakespeare, whoever he was, left a final unwritten ending to a play. It's his own story. And you, the modern age, can engage that story. And the case is not closed on who wrote Shakespeare. So you can contribute your own, and there's so much to come forward yet. So if I had to say right now, I think the case is leaning for Oxford, when you realize that he was the son-in-law of the most powerful minister to Queen Elizabeth, that he was married to the daughter, when you realize that his daughters were either married to or engaged to the only 3 people that were Shakespeare ever dedicated to, then you've got that close familial relationship. So however it turns out, I think Oxford is going to be there. But like Lisa said, there's one soul journey in some of the more personal plays, and you can pick that up.
But we're still sticking to this myth, right? That there is no question. Right. I mean, that's sort of the common. I mean, I really, like, previous to watching your documentary, I thought, well, Shakespeare wrote those plays. And now I don't know what to think.
The beauty of it is Sir Derek Jacobi put it beautifully. He says, I beg them to accept that it's a legitimate question to ask. Just that alone can engage people if you accept that, look, even the author is telling you there's a problem with identity here. Then Sigmund Freud, the greatest minds, Supreme Court justices pick up that trail. Mark Twain, who's a writer, knows what it means to create great work and how you can either choose to reveal yourself or not in the works that you do. Even on a subconscious level, I don't know how it can be prevented. I think it's worth at least, like Sir Derek Jacobi says, a legitimate question to pursue.
Yeah, and it is an accepted question. Now, it's not it's some people still like to use the word conspiracy theory, but that's long gone, I think. In the last 5 to 10 years, the Orthodox biographies and the Shakespeareans who put out the biographies are admitting that now it's a collaboration. Shakespeare collaborated. So now they're slowly moving off center and coming up with other platforms by which to open up the engagement into it's either a collaborative exercise or we've got the wrong author. I think it's just a matter of time.
Well, you blew my mind with your documentary and changed my perceptions about Shakespeare, and also my mispronunciation of Derek Jacobi. I was been saying Derek Jacobi for years. Now I feel how did I get that wrong? I enjoyed his work forever. So
I've heard both pronunciations.
Oh, really? There isn't. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there you go. Thank you for joining me on the Film Threat podcast. It's a pleasure. That Last Will and Testament is available all platforms, video on demand.
Yeah.
Where can I find it?
Amazon, Vudu, Tubi, all your basic streaming, Vimeo. You can find it on most platforms.
Awesome. I have all of those. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.